Hey guys, UnoPro here, back with another YouTube video, first one in a while, and this is my first one talking about Keyforge. Now this is a game I'm very excited for. Just a quick introduction for those of you who are not familiar with Keyforge. It is a game by Richard Garfield, creator of Magic the Gathering and Artifact, which is a unique deck game. Not a unique deck building game, it's just a unique deck game. You buy a deck out of a box that's randomly generated and it is unique to you only. You can't get that deck anywhere else. You can't swap cards out, you can't deck build, there's nothing like that. Now the reason that I'm actually interested in a game like this is really because I want to recapture that feeling of playing a card game as a child. You know, I wasn't really that into card games as a child, but we played Yu-Gi-Oh! Me and my brother and a couple of mates. We didn't really know the rules, we had no idea what a set was, we had no idea what a meta was, what a net deck was. We just kind of had the cards lying around and we just played with them and we just kind of figured it out. But what I really loved about that is that you had these kind of storylines of this guy has this awesome card, you know, he has a Dark Magician, I wish I had one of them, or this guy's deck's crazy, you know, I want to verse that. And you kind of have this ownership of this deck or this card. And Keyforge can really capture that. These days, modern card games, and maybe it's just because I'm older and more experienced with card games, you know, I know there's a meta. There's no real uniqueness to the deck because, well, I don't think, you know, I don't verse mono red in Magic the Gathering and think, oh my goodness, look at this guy's deck, it's crazy. I think, okay, well, he just, you know, looked it up and then he ordered the cards. There's nothing personal about it. So hopefully it's going to recapture that feeling of, you know, this is my deck, I learned this deck, you know, look at that guy's deck, it's crazy, I can't wait to verse him, or I wish I could beat that deck, you know, I wish I could have that. You kind of have that personal feeling and personal attachment to the deck. So I think that's something I'm really looking forward to. Now, I think this is a fantastic system. I think it's going to be great for playing casually, especially because you can just pick it up and play, and you know, especially with the limited, like I just don't need to know anything, I just pick up the deck, I play it, and I'm on an even playing field deck-wise. I don't have to invest more. It's a set price. I think that's really good. Now, I'm a competitive player, and naturally people want to play this game competitively. And when you start to think about how that will work, it becomes quite clear that there's a bit of an issue. And that is that certain decks will be more powerful than others. That's fine, that's part of the game. But a secondary market can start to occur, where certain combinations are better, we know them. Even if they're not exact card lists, we know that certain decks will be really good. And suddenly, you know, eBay can turn up and people are starting to sell the best decks for quite a lot of money. You know, we've already seen a deck for $100 on eBay. I don't know if that's actually a sustainable price, but we've seen that there's a precedent for that, and that's pretty reasonable to assume. Or even just simply assuming that when you have these, you know, constructed events, if you want to call them constructed, where you choose your own deck to bring, someone who's opened 15 decks and knows which one's the best one, picks it out, is going to have an advantage over someone who just buys 3 decks and plays fairly casually. And unlike something where Magic the Gathering, where you kind of have a hard cap on how much a deck, you know, the best deck will cost, even if you know, keep paying more, it's fairly expensive. You know, Magic standard deck costs $500, but if I buy the best deck for $500, someone who's paid $600 isn't actually going to do better than me, because adding more expensive cards to the deck won't necessarily make it better. Whereas in Keyforge, we can kind of pretty safely assume that the more money you spend, the better chances you'll have, and it will kind of keep going up. So it's not that I can, you know, say, okay, well, yeah, it's expensive, I can save up, but I pay $300, I'll be just as competitive as anyone else. It's kind of like, well, I can save up my money, spend $300, but someone might come along and win because he spent $400. I think that's a big issue that we want to avoid. So my solution to this is, well, the name is terrible, I'm not suggesting these, something like a soul-bound deck. Now, what that would be is specific decks for specific, I'm talking specifically about competitive high-level events, something like competitive level events in Magic, not a regular event, where, you know, say once a month, you could sign up to purchase X number of soulbound decks, and there'd be a limit on it. Say, let's just say 4 soulbound decks a month. So I pay my 40, maybe 50, maybe it's a premium depending on how you do it, $50 for these 4 decks. Fantasy Flight Games will assign these decks to me and whoever the other player did it, and then send them out. Now, preferably, FFG would be the ones assigning the decks to avoid corruption, you know, with store owners giving it to their friends, the better decks. But by having the decks already assigned to players before they're sent out, you can avoid that. That's not the end of the world. So these decks get sent out to me. Now, these are just normal decks, but these decks, before I even open them, before I can find out how good they are, they're assigned to me. And when I play a competitive level event at the top with the soul cards, I can only use these cards. I can only use my deck. Okay? So I can't buy a deck of someone else. My friend can't trade me his deck. these are my decks, but I get to choose which one I want to bring. So, a tournament, I can say, well, this is my best deck, I'm going to bring that. That's my deck. So all I've had to do to be on the same level as everyone else is, spend my 40 bucks. And I'm maximum competitive for that month. And maybe it's every month that happens. Or, you can play around with the numbers, that's not important. The idea is, though, that you can sign up to get a set number of decks that you can use in competitive level events. And, as the time goes on, I'll have a bigger pool. These are all my competitive choices. Fantasy Flight's still getting something out of the deal. They're still getting a constant subscription. And it avoids a situation where if I want to be competitive, I have to buy a deck off eBay. So I pay my set amount, I have these decks, I still have this essence of the game where it's my personal deck. I've got to learn it, I've got to master, I've got to learn to beat other people's personal decks. But there removes that scaling of money to win rate. I think that's really, really important. So that's the main kind of reason for the idea. I think it can have some really good advantages. We will talk about the disadvantages as well, it's only fair. One of the advantages, I think, is it really, when you have high level events, especially when you get players who start to be a bit well known, or just well watched tournaments, you can start to build this narrative, which is what you want with the game of, this guy has that deck. Oh wow, he's got that, I don't know the card names that well yet, but he's got this specific card, bait and switch. He's got an awesome bait and switch deck. This guy has that, can anyone beat him? Has anyone opened something recently that can beat that, take him out? We know that this other pro player, he's got this specific deck that he opened that's really, really good. He always does really well with that one. Can this really good player beat this guy with a better deck? All these kind of narratives I think is really good, and that's kind of the essence of this game. If you don't have those storylines, why are you playing this game? That's just the whole point of it, really. The main advantage for players is that you can just have a set amount to pay, and you can be as competitive as possible. And that's not really something that actually exists in any other card game, because it's never going to be a set amount. The cost of meta decks will change. Sometimes your deck will go out of the meta, you need to spend more and more. I can't just play Magic and say, I need to spend 300 bucks and I can be as competitive as possible. Because sometimes the best deck's going to cost 400 bucks. Sometimes it's going to cost 200 bucks, and it's going to get rotated out, it's cost another 100. There's no set cost with this. But if you have this subscription service with these soul decks, then I can budget for it. I can spend 40 bucks a month and I can be as competitive as anyone else in the world. And I think that's a really, really good thing. Because to an extent, Fantasy Flight games will benefit slightly from this kind of the system as it is, where someone might want to buy 15 decks just to be competitive. But at the same time, when a deck gets sold for 10 bucks in Fantasy Flight games and then someone sells it for 200 bucks on eBay, they're not the ones seeing that money. So there is definitely some incentive for them to do it. Also, gives options for Fantasy Flight games to sell the deck for a little bit more if they wanted to do something like give you a custom card back name, because that deck's getting assigned to you. I'm not sure the logistics of that is obviously up for them to figure out, but there's no reason you can say the Soulbound decks cost 15 bucks instead. You get a custom card back name and competitive entries, whatever you want to do with that kind of thing. There's a lot of room for it. So let's talk about the disadvantages. It's only fair. Number one, obvious one, is logistically, it's going to be more work for Fantasy Flight games. You have to have a system for assigning to people. If they do it through the local game stores assigning it, then there's room for corruption. Obviously, it needs to be working with the app, all that kind of thing. And that really does depend on the process. But obviously, they can figure it out. And I think that having the subscription, having more people playing competitively and regularly buying, they can rely on that. They can make business plans around that. I think it will benefit them financially, hopefully. Other disadvantages is for someone who, say, opens their favorite deck in just a random limited event. Well, now they can't play that deck in the highest level events because there wasn't one of their soulbound decks. So when it comes to people always wanting to play the deck they want to play, maybe there's a 3-faction combination they want to play, they can't play that in the highest level event unless they get lucky and open that in their few decks. That's a trade-off that I think the community has to decide, and Fantasy Flight needs to decide if that's something they wanted to do as a trade-off, because you can't always play the deck you want, but at the same time, the people who are willing to spend hundreds of dollars can't always play the exact deck that they want that's going to win every tournament. So I think that for people who want to be able to have a chance at winning tournaments but don't want to spend a lot of money, this system is great. If you just want to be able to play as many events as possible with your favorite deck, well, it's not the best system ever. But this wouldn't replace all the events. Wouldn't be the idea. If I was running things, you'd still have plenty of events where you can bring your own constructed deck. It's just not the highest level events. It's not playing for the serious prizes and all that kind of thing. Another issue is if maybe someone doesn't want to buy a lot of decks. Maybe they bought the starter pack and they can't really afford. Maybe they buy one every few months. They can't really participate in a system like that because they need to be regularly buying soulbound decks or buy it at all. When they already have their decks, this system comes along and, well, now I can't play in these tournaments. Why? Because I can't spend any more money. Though I think I kind of don't put too much weight on that, just because I think playing competitively, like properly competitively in any card game, there's always going to be some kind of barrier from price, rather than always just being able to play. And I mean, someone who spends $20 in any other card game isn't really going to be able to play competitive events very well either. So I think that's completely fine. I think they need to find a nice balance if they wanted to do something like this. But I really do like that storyline of this is my deck, these are my decks, I get to choose one, and I don't feel pressured to spend any more because I can't spend any more to get a competitive advantage because these are my decks. I get these 4 decks, I go home, I say, alright, how are we going to figure this out? What am I going to do? What are my strategies? Maybe next week I get extra decks come out. Okay, now I need to make a best of 3. This is what I have to work with. Let's figure it out. Not, okay, I bought 10 decks the other day. I didn't get anything I wanted. I didn't get these 3 factions. I better go get my credit card out. It's not something like that. It's figuring out what you have. Everyone starts at the same point, and there's a very low maximum of how much you can spend to get an advantage. Anyone who's willing to max out whatever they do will be completely fine and be competitive. And I think that's the real potential of this game, is that someone like myself, who maybe this won't be my, it's very unlikely this will be my main card game, but I'm still a competitive player. And when I go out there and play, I would like to be able to play a deck and know that I have every chance as everyone else of winning. If I play well and if I can figure this stuff out, I can have a chance of winning. And now I know I don't have to go spend $300. I don't have to research all this meta. I go pay my money, I get the decks I need, and that's the same as everybody else. We're on an even playing field, and then the better players will win. Obviously, you can still have decks that are better than others, and those players will have better chances, but that's just part of Keyforge. That's just how it is. So I think having everyone start from the same point is really, really important. So that's my idea. Let me know what you think. I'd love to hear your feedback either on Reddit or YouTube of what you think the advantages and disadvantages of this system. Obviously, I came up with this idea, so it's harder for me to criticize it. But I do think it could be really good potential, and maybe even if Fantasy Flight Games just doesn't consider it at all, maybe some local game stores can take this idea and run it similar to something like a sealed league in Magic the Gathering the local game store will run. Anyway guys, thank you very much for watching. Make sure to leave your feedback, and hopefully I'll do some more Keyforge videos in the future. See you later guys.